Greetings, Gloria Day. It is Ash Wednesday 2025, and it's giving a little more Ash Wednesday 2020, back when we were in the pandemic and meeting online around videos like this one. It just so happens that today we're unable to meet because of a snowstorm that's happening outside. We are finding ourselves not doing what we expected to do today, not with the people we expected to be with, and having to just figure out something new for how our day is going to go, which is kind of an appropriate way to enter the Lenten season. As we enter Lent, we start with Ash Wednesday, which reminds us of our mortality, reminds us that from ashes we come and to ashes we go, but the Lord's love endures forever. So if you are worshiping from another space other than the church, and you're having to punt like we are this day, I encourage you to find something that can give you your ash symbol on your head and still participate in this practice that starts off our Lent season and takes us on a journey together all the way to the cross and beyond. Welcome to worship.
Well, here we are, snowed out on Ash Wednesday. Before jumping into a reflection, here's a reading from Scripture. It's from the book of Exodus. In the evening, quails came up and covered the camp, and in the morning there was a layer of dew around the camp. When the layer of dew lifted, there on the surface of the wilderness was a fine, flaky substance, as fine as frost on the ground. When the Israelites saw it, they said to one another, "What is it?" For they did not know what it was. Moses said to them, "It is the bread that the Lord has given you to eat. This is what the Lord has commanded. Gather as much of it as each of you needs, an omer per person according to the number of persons, all providing for those in their own tents." The Israelites did so, some gathering more, some less. But when they measured it with an omer, those who gathered much had nothing over, and those who gathered little had no shortage. They gathered as much as each of them needed. And Moses said to them, "Let no one leave any of it over until morning." But they did not listen to Moses. Some left part of it until morning, and it became wormy and rotten. And Moses was angry with them. Morning by morning they gathered it as much as each needed. But when the sun grew hot, it melted. Here ends the reading. Well, once again, it's Ash Wednesday, and we thought we might be here worshiping together, but instead we're all in our own places. And to get us going with this reflection, I would like to share with you some stories of my own fragility. My guess is you have your own stories, and these stories range from the exciting to the mundane, from the silly to the serious. But here's the one I want to start with. So when I was in 4th grade, I lived on a hill, and I was outside playing on my rollerblades in my neighborhood with some neighborhood friends, when we got the idea that what would be really fun is for me to get inside one of those old Step 2 wagons and head down the hill in the wagon. Now, the key was, for reasons that are beyond me, I don't remember what we were thinking, we decided that it was essential to the experience that I keep the rollerblades on inside the wagon. So there I am. I've got my rollerblades on. I make my way into the wagon. They figure out how to kind of jam the handle so that it's stuck up, and they get ready to push me down the hill. I'm getting there. I'm ready. I'm ready to go. I am feeling invincible. And so finally they push me down the hill. And I get going just a little bit, and then I'm going faster and faster, and then I'm kind of cruising. And at this point, a car starts coming up the hill right at me, and I freak out. I start to panic. I realized that I need to figure out how to bail. And so I lunge myself out of the wagon. And of course, because I'm on my skates, I slip this way and that and fall down hard on my hip. Now, the thing was that I was wearing a very particular kind of pants, and it was these 2000s Adidas, the ones with buttons down the side, both sides of the legs. They weren't quite as fly as these ones, but they were pretty awesome, except when you landed on them. And when I landed right on one of those buttons. It dug deep into my skin and it scraped down. I am not going to show you a picture of the actual scar, but here is basically what that scar looked like. It was bad. In fact, I still have a scar that's about this shape on my hip. Now, the thing was, my parents missed all of this. Somehow they didn't see it. And so after it happened, I made my way in, and somehow I secretly made my way to the bathroom and tried to clean it up by myself before anyone knew what was going on. And then for the next month, I tried to hide this cut from my mom. And I succeeded for a long time, but eventually it failed. She saw it and predictably she said, "What in the world? What is this? What happened?" And I had to tell her the story. Every time I look at that scar on my hip, I am reminded how silly, how ridiculous, frankly, how stupid I was being, thinking that I was that invincible, because of course I wasn't. And this is not the only story. I could also tell you about the time that I took the ramp too far away from the sidewalk, and when I jumped, I almost made it, but I clipped my toes on the curb and then smacked my head down. Thankfully, I was wearing a helmet. I could tell you about the time in high school that I pulled an all-nighter and proceeded to fall asleep on the bus on the way home so that my mom had to come and get me at the bus depot that afternoon after realizing that when the bus had gone by, I didn't get off. I could tell you about the time in grad school when a friend of mine and I tried to carry a ping pong table down our stairs into my basement, an ill-advised plan from start to finish, and I ended up with a hernia. I could tell you about the way that when I got that hernia repaired, I thought the recovery process would be fairly simple, but I remained on pain medication for much longer than I was anticipating. I could tell you about my anxiety and about the way that I resisted taking medication for it for so long until finally a doctor just asked me, why? Why don't you want to do this? And slowly broke down that wall that I had so that I could get the help and support that I needed. I could tell you about all of these things, but of course we don't have time. And again, you have your own stories, and maybe most importantly, you get the point. We are fragile creatures. We are not invisible. And this is part of what Ash Wednesday is all about. This fragility, again, shows up in our lives in all kinds of ways. But the bottom line is we can't do things like predict the future. We can't work ahead so far that we're not going to be behind for a super long time and we can just chill and eliminate the stress from our lives and be good. We can't go that long without eating or drinking. We can't go that long without sleep. In fact, every day we need to eat. We need to rest. We are not self-sufficient. We require that kind of help and support. And what I want you to hear clearly on this Ash Wednesday day is that God does not expect anything more from us. It's not as if God expects us to be superhuman, and when we aren't, we are failures. No, I think failure often looks a little bit more like me working my way to the bathroom, doing everything I could to hide my brokenness, doing everything I could to hide the mistake that I had made, doing everything I could to not need to depend on others or admit my errors or fragility or weakness. If anything, that was the mistake, because God meets us right where we are in the midst of it. It's not always in the way that we expect, but we can be sure of God's love and provision for us. We know this in the story of Jesus, which of course we will explore over the course of Lent together. It's a great time to begin meditating on that. But it also shows up in this story that we just heard a little bit of from Exodus. In this story, the Israelites have just been freed from slavery in Egypt by God, from endless days of unpaid, brutal toil where they're treated without dignity and without respect and with little agency, without any choice for what their day is going to look like when they wake up. They wake up and they're told what to do, and they're treated as subhuman, doing the work of their oppressors, until finally God frees them from this situation, bringing them through the Red Sea on their way to a land flowing with milk and honey. In other words, a land that is going to be a great home for them. But in order to get there, they need to go through the wilderness. And they are not excited about this. In fact, only 3 days into their journey, they begin to grumble and complain. In fact, pretty immediately, they use some rose-colored glasses to remember their days in Egypt, wondering why they can't be back there, where at least they had a bunch of delicious food. Now, the thing is, we don't know for sure what the Israelites were eating in Egypt, but it sure sounds to me like a case of amnesia, a kind of convenient forgetfulness, a painting with a broad brush, an experience that was actually brutal, but they just don't like experiencing this weakness again in the wilderness in a new place. They are upset. And God, understandably, is frustrated by their grumbling, but God, of course, still provides for them in the midst of it, and God uses this as a teaching moment. God says, I am going to feed you, and I'm going to do it in a very particular way. It's going to be like this. Every morning when you wake up, there's going to be a fine dew on the ground. At least that's what it's going to look like. But that flaky dew is actually going to be a bread-like substance. And what you're going to do is each day you're going to go out and you're going to gather as much as your family needs. No more, no less. On the 6th day, I will send enough that you can gather a double portion, because I want that 7th day to be a day of rest, God says. So you'll get twice as much on the 6th day, and then on the 7th day, I won't send any. So don't even bother going out to look. But here's the thing, if you take more than you need, it's going to rot, it's going to stink, it's going to be gross if you try to keep it overnight. But there will always be enough for each and every one of you, and so you don't have to be afraid. Simply trust. I will provide for you. Now, God doesn't just do this for one day or for a week or for a couple of months. Instead, this is the way that God feeds the Israelites in the wilderness for the next 40 years. It's pretty remarkable. And sometimes they're great at it, but other times they really struggle with it. Now, God doesn't just do this for one day or for a week or for a month or for a couple months. Instead, God does this for the next 40 years. For their 40-year journey in the wilderness, this is how the Israelites eat. And I find this astounding. They didn't get to, like campers, put their food in their backpack and occasionally restock so that at the end of the day, they would know that they had their food in the morning in that sense. No, they had to go to sleep trusting that in the morning, God would provide, again, daily bread. And not only is this how God meets the Israelites in the midst of their fragility and their weakness in the wilderness, I'm convinced this is also how God meets us in the midst of our weakness and our fragility. Now, during our time together, I've had this bowl of snow sitting here. It's, of course, started to melt. Pastor Marla at the beginning invited you to grab something that you might be able to use to make this sign of the cross on your forehead, marking Ash Wednesday. And if you're having trouble finding something that you think will work, I would suggest grabbing a bit of snow, placing that on your forehead. And the incredible thing about it is you will feel it, you will know it's there, but almost as soon as you put it on, you won't be able to see it very well anymore. It'll be as fine as dust and just as quick to sometimes disappear. We share these words on Ash Wednesday: ashes to ash, dust to dust. Remember that you are dust, and to dust you shall return. And it sounds dark. But again, while it does remind us of our mortality, of our death, of our fragility, it doesn't do so in a way to make you feel like a failure. It does so to remind you that you don't have to hide that part of who you are. God already knows how fragile you are. And God meets you right where you are in that fragility. This is a part of how God has made us. And so know today that God meets you. I mean, after all, when we went to sleep last night, I was hoping that today we would be able to gather for Ash Wednesday, or at least yesterday afternoon, that's what I was hoping, but we didn't have a lot of control over that. We can't control the weather. We are dependent so often on things beyond our control. And so tonight, as you're getting ready for bed, as you call it a day, as you're listening to your body and can tell that it needs some rest, maybe even as your mind starts to race over certain details from the day or plans tomorrow, my prayer and hope for you would be that you would be able to take a second to pause, to remember, maybe even to feel your forehead for a second, and know that when you wake up in the morning, God will provide daily bread for the journey. Some days it will feel like enough, other days it won't. Often it will look a little bit different from the way that we expected. Some days you may even accurately feel like you are at rock bottom, but God will never leave you or leave me there. God will continue to provide and keep you moving forward. So as we begin to reflect and meditate together on the story of Jesus this Lent and on the stories of our own lives, and as we start from this place of remembering our fragility, may you know this, that God's love is there for you and it is always enough. Amen.
Thank you for joining us in our Ash Wednesday worship online today. We're so glad that you made space and time to be with us, even if it's over the web. Just a reminder that as we go through this Lenten season, we go together, and there are lots of ways that you can join us. Hopefully by now you have your Lenten guide. That's in it has all the things that are happening during Lent, such as our Wednesday midday Lenten services and our Wednesday evening Lenten services, and then also the 3 days that take us up to Easter morning, and then all of our Easter services. It includes the Palm Festival that we have on Palm Sunday and the Easter egg hunt that we have on the Saturday before Easter. So check out that guide or check us out online to make sure that you know all the different ways that you can come together and join us in this Lenten journey. I will leave you with this blessing. May we find the road that leads to life. May we take the turns that bring right relationships. May we pause to accompany others along the way. And may we journey with God through Lent and long for the horizon and dawn. The peace of Christ be with you all. Amen.